one thing, just surmising from what we saw, might Urho be getting a chance to come back in tonight? And also within the same question, kind of wondering just your evaluation of Morrow now that you've had a handful of games in a row to see him.
Yeah, I mean the lineup will be the game time decisions, as you know. There's Vox might get a look, and Scotty, I think as far as my assessment of what he's brought, I think there's been some good, and then there's been moments where we'd like to see growth. I don't think that's atypical of any young player, especially young defenseman. So we like his ability to move the puck. We think he sees it pretty well. He's pretty good along that offensive blue line. He has an ability to get shots through. He's good at finding sticks. An example of that would have been JT's slot tip in the Chicago game. Really good look, good vision, good awareness along the blue line by Scotty. He changes his angle to open up that opportunity to create that play. That's what we like about his game. And so, and then just the other element of it is just, making decisions with conviction and having good reads, getting inside the dots when he's coming off the offensive blue line and defending the rush aggressively. His net front play at the net front in our own end, killing plays in the D zone in the corners, just closing, taking away time and space, going stick to puck. When to have one hand in your stick or two hands in your stick. Stick detail is such an important element of being a good defender in today's game. Those are all the things that we're working with him about. But we love his enthusiasm for the game. He's a great kid, and he loves hockey, and he's invested, and we love that aspect of him.
I've talked to a few players about this recently. It's more something I've kind of observed sometimes in practice as well. There was a practice recently where I know you were stressing, I remember you saying you wanted them to make people defend you, and you talked a little bit about wanting to, enter the zone with possession when you have the opportunity to do that. I'm curious, kind of big picture, and how you feel like the team is doing with it. This is a team that I think in the past has had some east-west tendencies, and I know early on you talked about a lot about wanting to get north and establish a forecheck and all that kind of stuff. But are you at a point now where you're trying to kind of help them find that balance of when you want to get pucks deep and establish a forecheck versus when there's an opportunity to attack off the rush with possession?
Yeah, we've had that. That's been a running conversation all year long.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to continue all year long. And I think when you look at how the game is being played today, I don't think we're unique as far as our team is with respect to that conversation. I think that conversation is going on in every locker room in the league. And the reality is when you have offensively gifted people, part of their DNA is they want to make plays, right? And my experience has been we certainly don't want to discourage our best players from making plays. We want to give them the latitude to do so. Having said that, there's inherent risk in playmaking, and we just want them to be calculated on when and how they do it. We try to build a little bit of a criteria around that to give them, some clarification or what the expectation is on the game we're trying to play. So, and certainly, certain guys are going to get a little bit more latitude than others just based on, their respective bodies of work. A guy like Brett, for example, gets a lot of latitude. We give him a lot of latitude for, I think, all the right reasons, because he has an ability to drive offense. And he sees it better than any of the rest of us do, and that's what separates him from others. And so I've always been a believer that, it would be irresponsible of me to get in the way of that, and I try not to. But having said that, we can't play a high-risk game where we're going east-west all the time and we're feeding a team's transition game and they're driving it down our throat, because my experience would tell me that it's really hard to win if you play that game. And so, I think the conversation that we're having is a common sense, prudent conversation about what winning hockey looks like. And managing the puck is an important element of that. If we want to be hard to play against, one of the easiest ways to not be hard to play against is to feed a team easy offense. Well, how do you do that? The easiest way to do it is you mismanage the puck in the wrong areas of the rink. And now you allow them all kinds of odd man rushes, odd man situations where talented players have the ability to take advantage, and that's the game that they thrive on. So that's the conversation that we have constantly with our guys, and we'll continue to do that. It's really it's an understanding of situational play. It's situational awareness, and that's an important element of winning.
If I could follow up on something that you touched on earlier, when we saw yesterday Gavrikov is getting power play work in practice. You had said at one point you didn't expect that he would have this many goals at this point of the season and stuff. Has he been miscast? Because I talked to Igor that night, and he said he did this in Russia. Like he was he could score goals in Russia. Is this something that we just didn't know about this guy, that he could play offense?
No, I don't know if we didn't know about his ability to help us produce offense. I guess I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I expected he'd have as many goals as he has at this point in the year. I think his offensive game has been a welcome addition to the group. And so given the circumstance that we're in right now when Foxy's out of the lineup, and you look at the group of defensemen that we have, in the lineup right now, we're having the conversation on, which guys do we try on the power play that give us the best chance to have success. Well, Vladdy certainly has produced more offense than the other guys that we have that are in the lineup right now. And so common sense would suggest that maybe we should try Vladdy there. He's one of the things he's done very well is his ability to get pucks down to the net. And so that could be a welcome addition on that second power play unit. The other element that we always take into consideration is just player deployment, how we're utilizing guys. That next shift at the end of the power play, you got to be able to come over the boards with certain people, because most of the time the guys coming on the ice after we're on the power play when a team's killing a penalty are usually their better players. So that shift after is I think that's a conversation that our coaching staff has a lot about. Okay, who are we coming over the boards with next, given that circumstance? So, up front, we use so many forwards on our first power play. We're very limited with our access to what we do there. And then on the blue line, one of the things we liked about Vladdy was we liked the ability to come back with Vladdy at the end of the power play because of how well he defends. So that's part of the decision why we made him the way we have to this point. But given where we've been and where we are right now, we felt like this might be the time to give it a shot.
You said last week that Lafreniere played his best game. What is specifically, I guess, stood out to you about his game through this recent stretch?
I just think he's hanging on to pucks. He's challenging people in the right areas of the rink. It's not a high-risk proposition. He's driving wide. He's got a low-ice mentality off the rush where he's trying to drive pucks deep into the zone, and then he acts on his instincts from there. But he's not throwing pucks away. He's hanging on to pucks. He's challenging people. He's making people defend him, and he's hard to defend when he hangs on to pucks. He's a good one-on-one player. The other thing he's done is he's going to the net. He's at the blue paint a lot more the last few games, and as a result, he's around it. He's around the puck a lot, and he has it a lot because of that. So those are the things that we've been trying to encourage him to do, and I think he's done a really good job at it the last few games.
Is that an example of a guy hears you talking about wanting to get north all the time, and maybe you see him not holding pucks enough when they have the opportunity to, and you gotta have to remind him, hey, we want you to make plays when the opportunity is there. We appreciate what you're trying to do, but we also want you to, create some offense off the rush and things of that nature.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's part of the conversation. As I said to you guys all along, and we've said to the team, we're not asking our team we're not trying to turn our team into a chip and chase team. There's a chip and chase element to everybody's game, and we need to have that as part of our game. But by no means are we trying to turn this team into a chip and chase team. I just look at the way the game's being played. You watch around the league, not just our team. Watch the league. That's what I do all the time. In the off season, we do a deep dive into it. you know, the way the game's being played, the evolutions of the game, and you know, speed is an important element of it, but north-south is another one. You know, the best teams play a north-south game, you know, and that doesn't mean that they don't make plays. That doesn't mean that, you know, there isn't an east-west element associated to their game. But what they don't do is they don't play the game in a rocking chair, you know, where you play a slow down, you know, D to D to D to D type game where you've got to beat people twice sometimes.
And that's what you mean when you say hybrid, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the hybrid game. Is we want to play a north-south game, preferably with it. If we can keep it and make plays, let's do it. If we can't, we can create offense different ways. We can put pucks behind defensemen. We can put our opponents in vulnerable positions where we create off a turnover. And that's the transition element, right? A transition game, you know, it isn't just transition out of the neutral zone or transition out of the D zone. You can create a transition game in the O zone with your puck pursuit off of a forecheck. You put defensemen in vulnerable positions. You make them make a hard play. You know, if they make mistakes or a loose puck presents itself, there's a huge window of opportunity. That's a transition element. So I think, you know, what we're trying to build here is a hybrid game between possession and pursuit. And we have the capability to do both. You know, once again, I can only share my own experiences, but I think the best teams have the ability to create offense multiple ways. They have good power plays that they create offense. When opportunities present themselves off the rush, they have the skill and the talent and the instincts to make the plays when they're there. But when they don't, they build a grind game where they get on top of you and they create turnovers, they put you in tough spots, and then they attack when they get the puck back. I just think that's part of the evolution of the game. That's how the game's being played today. And I think, you know, there's an opportunity for us to grow that aspect of our mindset and just having a willingness and an ability to create offense multiple ways.
You said
Guys, last one.
A couple of days ago that, you know, the way the standings are, I mean, a bad week you could be at the bottom, a good week you could be in a playoff spot. I mean, when it's that tight, I mean, for 82 games, it's a marathon, not a sprint. We hear it all the time. Like, you know, how hard is that to you know, going to be on your team if you have to play with this intensity every night?
Well, I just think that's the reality of today's game. That's, you know, there's parity in the league, you know, so, you know, there's very few teams that have a significant cushion in the standings where they might have the luxury to rest a player, for example, or something of that nature. I just think, you know, with today's NHL, with the parity in the league, most teams don't have that luxury. And so I just think it's the nature of, you know, it's the nature of today's game, the three-point system thing, you know, the whole overtime system with the 1 point, and it's hard to create separation. And so, you know, there's so much parity in the league today. You know, at the end of the day, for me, what I've tried to do with our group is, you know, you can't really focus on those things that are out of your control. You know, who wins where and things of that nature. I mean, everybody takes note, everybody watches the league and understands, but at the end of the day, you got to stay in the moment, focus on your group, focus on what we can do to put ourselves in the best position to have success. But we can't think about what's happening 3 days from now, a week from now, 2 months from now, or what's going to happen in April. We just got to take care of today. Let's be the best version of ourselves today. We'll worry about tomorrow when it comes. And I think if that's the approach and we just stay in the moment and just take advantage of the moment and bring an overwhelming enthusiasm to that moment, let's see where it takes us. But that's the approach that we're trying to take with our guys.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.